Councilmember Lester,
Here.
Baker,
Here.
Reba,
Here.
Cool,
Here.
Livingston, Mayor Tom Phillips.
Okay, thank you. Well, the first item of business is to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. If you join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Thank you. Okay, would anyone like to move any of the consent agenda items to the regular agenda? Okay, not hearing none. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Motion. Can I find a second? Second. Very good. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, the motion's carried. Like to welcome our guests here tonight. We do have a few people in the audience. That's kind of nice. If any of you'd like to make a comment, it's limited to 3 minutes. We can't take any action on these since they're not on the agenda, the topics you may bring up. If you'd like to comment on any of the items that are on the consent agenda, now's the time. Anything in the regular agenda, we'll wait until that item comes up. Okay, having no takers, we will move on. The next item up is the consent agenda. In that, we have expenditures, tax abatement, our February 16th minutes of the regular city council meeting, renewal of a Class C alcohol license with outdoor service for Legacy Golf Club, and a new 5-day Class C retail alcohol license for Top It Off Liquid Catering at 3040 Wright Place. We have a resolution approving the participation in the new national opioid settlement. Can I get a motion on the consent agenda? Been motioned it. Can I find a second?
Second.
Motioned and seconded. Lindsay, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Lester,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Reba,
Yes.
Cool.
Yes. Okay, the next item up is a public hearing regarding the fiscal year 24 city budget. And we'll now open the public hearing, and the time to be noted is, looks like 6:04. Now, at the last council meeting, we held a public hearing for the capital improvement plan, and that plan was approved by the council. The next step in our budgeting process is to hold this public hearing, followed by consideration of the fiscal year 2024 budget for our adoption. Before we take public comments, I'd like to turn the matter over to Gene Kelly, our finance director, for comments. And there you are. You're ready to go, Gene.
I'm standing up now, so
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, thank you.
thank you. Good evening. Put my glasses on. The budget presented before you for the next fiscal year, July 1, 2023 through June 30, 2024, was developed based on the priorities and goals of the Norwalk elected officials, city staff, and citizen input. Before I get into the numbers and some of the highlights of the budget, I thought I would provide a few updates regarding legislation currently under review. Senate File 181 was actually signed into law February 20th, 2023, and this affected our rollback. So apparently there was an error in the state November 22 calculations of the rollback. They didn't pull out that multi-residential factor. It was supposed to be the last year. So they submitted a number of 56.49. And it really truly should have been 54.65%. So a 1.84% difference from the original budget numbers. So we, like I said, that has been approved, and we did adjust those numbers. And I will give examples of how that will affect the average home later in this presentation. This resulted in a $72,000 reduction to our taxes across the board. So that about 34,000 in our general fund, 18,000 to our other two levies, which is our benefits levy and our debt service levy. Departments have sent me new numbers for this reduction. They were asked to trim 3% from their respective budgets, and they did that graciously. So I appreciate that from everyone. The next piece of legislation, Senate Study Bill 1124, which is turned into Senate File 356. Currently, this bill limits the amount of growth to 3.25% total, with no exceptions for new housing or businesses or TIF sunsetting. As written, the base year would be 25, which is good, because originally it had fiscal year 24. They did do an amendment that the base year would be 25 with the new formula effective 26. So we would essentially get a capture this year and next year's new value. We have quite a bit of TIF rolling off, so that really worked out well in Norwalk's favor. A similar bill is in the House, and it calls for a limitation of 3% instead of 3.25%. But the difference is it is limited to existing homes, existing value, and excludes new growth and TIF sunsetting. So that would be a lot more palatable for cities and Norwalk as well. I did talk to the Department of Management yesterday because we were running through the calculations. Luke and I were trying to figure that calculation out, and it's quite a calculation. So they had helped out. I did get some information that I felt was pretty positive. He said that the House and the Senate are so far apart right now on what they want to do with these changes that to assume that this will be passed this year is probably premature. So, but look for it in the next year or two. They are definitely going to make changes. We just don't know what they're going to look like. This bill would also limit general corporate purpose voting amounts. I know that we talked about if we have CIP projects, we have essential corporate purpose, and then we have general corporate purpose. General corporate purpose projects, such as if we wanted to build a new library or a new pool or do some parks and rec amenities, the limit used to be $7,000 we could spend up to before it had to go to a vote. This bill would reduce that to $490,000. So about 30%. Again, this one has not been approved. It's just current legislation. The final one is Senate Study Bill 1125. This one affects Lost. The state is thinking about taking the Lost formula, or actually taking the state sales tax that's 6% and adding 1% to it, and then just eliminating Lost that cities collect and then redistributing it back based on a certain formula to the cities. And we're trying to work through that. The bill also reduces commercial and industrial rollback to 85% and then 80% over 2 years. So, right now it's at 90% of commercial rollbacks. So that's another little tough thing that we'll have to handle. But anyway, those are, like I said, those have not been approved. The first one has. So I just wanted to mention those because I think the message is they're going to make changes to local government property taxes, and we just have to probably be ready for that.
The overall purpose of what the legislature is trying to accomplish, I believe they're trying to make the state more appealing for people to do business. They're trying to create a foundation for good, solid growth.
Right, yeah.
The disconnect is the unintended consequences of the legislation that has been drafted up to this point. It seems like they're listening a little bit with some of the changes that are coming along. We're certainly doing our best to work with the League of Cities. Even we're reaching out to private developers, trying to explain to them how the unintended consequences are going to negatively impact growth. So it's scary. It's the unknown right now of not knowing what they're going to pass. That to me is the biggest stressor.
Not knowing is the hardest part.
Yeah, it is. Sounds like it's kind of wide open up there. I visited, with our representatives up there, our senator and representative, and, expressed my point of view to them that I thought anytime you try to control a budget, I mean, it's one thing to control tax, to regulate a tax rate, right? But when you try to control a budget, you're trying to manage somebody else's operation. And the problem is if you got a growing town and your budget doesn't grow, you just hurt the people in it, you know? But if they leave that alone and just look at the taxes, it's possible they could figure out a way to maybe reduce the tax rate. And yet a growing community could get benefit from its growth. Otherwise, you're really hosed, I mean, especially if you're a fast growing community, because you pick up a lot of burden and ability. So, yeah, it's challenging. It'll be interesting to see what they come up with.
It's a little unique as much as we pay attention to legislation. I would say it's a little unique for Gene to lead off these budget discussions talking about legislation, but they're just that impactful.
Well, I guess the word is flexibility, isn't it?
Correct. Have to be ready for it. Okay, so I'll get into the real stuff here. Just go over some highlights of the budget. It's a $56 million budget, of which 6.2 million are transfers from various areas, mainly TIF and lost funds. Approximately 2.7 of TIF will be transferred to debt service for economic development and city TIF qualified projects. You guys, I know you've heard all this before, so I'm sorry if I'm redundant, but this is more for the public at this point, but stop me if you have any questions. General fund accounts for about 10 million. This pays for police, fire, EMS, parks and rec, library, community development, economic development, and administration, including IT and city attorney. Our special revenues of 6 million includes equipment and projects paid with lost, the road use fund, public works budget, and employee benefits such as health insurance, FICA, IFRS, work comp, and unemployment insurance. The TIF budget is about 5.6 million, and this is for economic development rebate payments, infrastructure incentives, and debt and principal interest payments. Debt service is about 5.6 million out of the budget. This is for capital projects the city borrows funds for, including streets and traffic signal improvements, trails, park buildings and equipment, fire equipment, and facilities maintenance. Our capital projects fund is approximately 15.6 million. This is for projects such as Norwalk Central, Beardsley and Highway 28, North Avenue and Highway 28, Holland Point Sewer Expansion, and other water and sewer projects. It's a large number. However, Norwalk is growing, and we're growing at a rapid rate. We are building and putting infrastructure in the ground as well as maintaining our current facilities. Our enterprise funds, which are water, sewer, and stormwater, is 13 million for operations, capital improvements, and expenses related to the Water Reclamation Authority and the Des Moines Water Works. So that's kind of a summary of the expenses. The revenues are estimated at 40.2 million. But you'll notice I mentioned 56 million for expenses, 40 million for revenues. The 15.8 million difference are from expenses to revenues is based on our CIP projects, not yet complete, but the funds were already acquired when we borrowed the money in August, 2022 bonds. We borrowed additional funds knowing that interest rates were going to ramp up, or that was the projection, and they have. So I think we made a wise decision. We borrowed 19 million at 3.44%. I asked today what they think the true interest cost would be, and they said probably between 4 to 4.5. So we save some decent dollars there. Taxes, including general fund, trust and agency, and tip account, are about 14.2 million of the revenues. Lost and other taxes, 1.8 million. License and permits and interest, 1.2 million. Intergovernmental, including road use tax, 3 million. Charges for fees and services, 10.2 million. Special assessments and other categories, about 540,000. Sewer revenue debt, short-term loan. The sewer revenue debt will be for the sewer expansion north and east, 3 million. And then transfers of about 6.3 million. So that makes up all the revenues in the budget. Norwalk's total assessed value increased 98.5 million. However, the taxable value grew 154 million. And staff and council knows why. This is due to 3 TIF areas expiring: Legacy, Colonial Meadows, and Norwalk Business Center. Next year, Echo Valley will expire with 110 million of assessed value, which is about 65 million for taxable value. So that will be really nice, little bump for that year. The city's taxable value growth was 1.59%. It was 29.4%, and then we had to redo them with the rollback reduction. That was for the general fund and 9.2% for the debt service fund. The city's TIF value for next fiscal year is 130 million. It was 216. We retired a bunch. And this will generate approximately 3.9 million. And to be used to offset debt and pay debt service, principal and interest payment, and then pay for some capital projects. The tax levy is decreasing 22 cents from 15.11 per thousand to 14.88, which is good news. The rollback set by the state legislature is increasing 0.52% from 54.13 to 54.65. What this means is a home maintaining a value of 325,000, and the key word there is maintaining. And that's 325,000 is basically what we use for an average. A home at 325 would pay approximately $16 less a year in city taxes. However, we know housing values have increased. We just heard from the assessor that they're going to go up quite a bit next year. I think, did she say, do we want to say it out loud?
18%.
Until they're official?
No, it's a scary number. And again, that's not automatically on every residential, depending on some properties that are in a certain price range, might have gone up more. Some is a lower, smaller percentage, but she gave us an estimate average of 18%.
I will say the assessor is tied to a formula that is set by the state of Iowa. They tell them that you need to stay within 95 to 105% of the market value. And that's kind of the trend right now. Apparently Norwalk or Warren County was low overall, so.
Anybody that wants to ask the fundamentals of why would it be that big of a difference? And it's really one main reason is because the price of the homes that are selling that much higher than what the assessed value is. So because of all these homes are selling, for example, $100,000 home consistently across the board is selling for $118,000. So the assessor, I'm greatly simplifying their formula, but a home at 100,000, assessed at 100,000, sells at 118,000. If that's everything that happens across the county, they're going to come back and say, okay, all of the $100,000 homes need to be assessed at 118,000. And that's not a city controlled formula. That's not a county controlled formula. This is a formula that's developed by the state of Iowa. And if assessors don't follow through on those revaluations, the state issues an equalization order and they will demand that assessor come in and adjust those valuations. So homes are selling at much higher. The benefit for all of us as property owners is the value of our property is going up, but the value of our property is going up. It's not as good if you're not selling your property.
Bright spot or part of it that's positive for us as a community is with the growth. We could take a look and see what we could possibly do with the mill levy and make adjustments, maybe to offset some of that increase. But we won't know that really until we get closer to being there.
Right. And that's the other thing, that 18% increase, that's for the following tax year.
Right, it's not for next fiscal year.
Right. So the numbers that Gene is talking about, that $16 less per year, that's as your valuations exist today with the levy rate that she is identifying. So next year, we'll see that 18% number show up on the valuations they give us. And we can use that to say, well, we don't need that 18%. We can lower the levy further. That's an option that council would have at that point in time.
Yeah, we'll have to take a look and see. But, you know, that may be the least of our worries too, depending on what the legislature does, so.
They may tell us what to limit it to. I talked about the housing value. The city is just one of several entities that citizens pay taxes to. We have no control over the school, the county, or other levies. So the $16 less is strictly just city taxes that I'm talking about. The city budget, taxes and fees for service pays for police, fire, EMS, parks, recreation programs, library, streets, sewer mains, water mains, stormwater facilities, building inspections, public programs, snow removal, street lighting, street cleaning, community planning and beautification, economic development programs, and administration to organize and maintain these services. In addition to all these services just mentioned, Norwalk has major projects underway and are part of this budget as well. These projects have been established based on the 2028 strategic vision developed by the elected officials. Norwalk Central is one of our big projects going on right now. It's about 12.8 million for that project. Street construction and asphalt overlay and traffic signal projects are approximately 12 million of this budget. This includes 1.4 million in grants from the DOT and MPO. Some of the main projects are Beardsley and Highway 28, Chatham and 28 signals, and street maintenance throughout our community. 4.4 million for the certified site. Infrastructure costs for that site. Public safety equipment, including police vehicles, fire equipment and gear, and facility improvements, and that's about 630,000. Sewer expansion project to the north and water main improvements on Wright Road and East 27th, 4.2 million. Wright Road is actually being paid with ARPA funds that we received last year. It was about 1.8, not quite 1.8 million, and we're using that for that sewer or that water main improvement project. We have engineering studies for potential westward transportation expansion, as well as sewer expansions to the south and northeast in this budget. And then finally, another major project is our Norwalk new urbanism project to include a potential LMI component to that, and then land purchase for the new water tower. Finally, I'll just talk about our fund balances. The city maintains reserves at a reasonable level to ensure money is available for contingencies and or unplanned expenses. Legislation potential. It's also important to investors and it's a highly weighted factor when borrowing money and establishing a credit rating. Norwalk is a AA stable rating, which means we're a very low credit risk and we have a high quality rating, which is a good thing. We keep our general fund reserves at about 30%. That's always our goal and it's our policy. We have been able to maintain that. Enterprise funds, we take a look at those consistently. Those are based on their projects, what they have in their capital improvements, any amount of current debt or operating costs. Again, we review these quarterly to ensure that they have adequate coverage. A lot of work goes into this budget process. I'd like to thank the elected officials and staff for working together as a team to develop and prioritize projects, and for being willing to remove or delay requests when necessary. Everybody did this so graciously this year, and everybody is really willing to work as a team, and I really appreciate it. If you have any questions for me or other members of the staff, we would be happy to answer those for you. I guess one thing I could mention is, I did mention the 1488 per thousand. The breakdown is 810 in our general fund. That's basically the maximum that's set by the state. $3.63 in our liability and property insurance, and then our employee benefits. 32 cents of that is property and liability insurance, and then $3.15 for our debt service make up that 1488. Have any questions? I'd be happy to answer this information. You've
I think
learned a lot.
one of the things I'd like to point out to the public, having the opportunity, is that we did a survey about a year ago, and one of the biggest concerns the public had was the conditions of the streets. And so, you know, I appreciate that we were able to increase the amount of funding that we're using for that purpose to both repair and replace the street. That's more expensive now with the price of concrete and what's happened to it, you know, and make it harder. Any other questions by the council or comments?
Wayne does a good job.
Yeah, he does. I love to go out and watch him work. I can watch work all day. Okay, with no other questions, thank you. Gene, I appreciate it. That was a very good report, very clear and concise. Before we take, let's see, Lindsay, have you received any oral or written comments?
I have not.
Okay, very good.
We did have an email. It was somewhat related. The one, we had a citizen from the Warrior Run area. Had a number of questions for the mayor, but there were a couple about the budget, mainly about CIP projects, asking what was coming up. So we sent him all of the CIP documentation, the information from this agenda, and we have not had any other further comment.
Okay, good. Good. All right, let's see. Are there any public comments at all on this item? Okay, and no public comments. We'll close the public hearing and please note the time is 6:26, I believe. Okay, we just had a public hearing on the budget. And so we now need to take action to adopt the fiscal year 2024 budget as presented. Does the council have anything to add or change?
I'd like to just say thanks to the staff. You guys have done a lot of work on this. So thank you, Gene, Holly, and everybody, Luke, Wayne, everybody is a piece of this. So thank you guys very much.
I've been here since before time and this is the smoothest budget process I've seen. Really it is. And so my comments to the staff, compliments, it's nice to see something that's not necessarily a real painful process. Not everybody gets what they want, but that's life in the past. Okay. No other discussion or comments. Gene, is there any other information you'd like to bring forward?
I have nothing further.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the resolution as presented in the packet?
Motion.
Yeah, I have a motion. Can we find a second out there?
Second,
Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Okay, Lindsay, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Baker,
yes.
Reba,
Yes.
Cool,
Yes,
Lester.
Yes.
very good. That motion is passed and you will have a budget next year. Okay. The next resolution is to approve the city of Norwalk's fiscal year 2023 reestimated fiscal year 2024 budget transfer. And Gene, do you have any comments on this item?
Yeah, this is a state requirement that we show when we're transferring money from one fund into another fund, and that we state the reason why we're doing that. We have the lost money that come in, we have TIF money that comes in, and we generally transfer those into different funds to pay for different various projects or other items. And it's just a requirement that we're very transparent with how we transfer those and why we do that. And so we put that information out there.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the resolution as presented in the packet?
Motion.
Motion. Second,
Okay, there you go. I got a motion and a second. Baker got it out, so. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Lindsay, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Reba,
Yes.
Cool,
Yes.
Lester,
Yes.
Baker.
yes.
All right, very good. Motion passes. And now we'll have a public hearing regarding the establishment of the HH Norwalk Planned Unit Development. We'll open this public hearing at 6:30. Please note the time. The HH Norwalk PUD is located just north of Norwalk Central. And they're here to formally establish a PUD for their property. Luke Paris, thanks for joining us. I'll turn this over to you.
Thank you. I'll just run through the kind of basics of the PUD, and then we can talk a little bit about the planning commission recommendation from them, and then happy to answer any questions. So PUD for the property is Ed mentioned north of Chatham, north of Norwalk Central. You can see our map on the screen there. We divided it into two parcels, parcel A and parcel B. Parcel A is a C3 parcel, so just straight commercial. Parcel B would be allowed to be a mix of C3, so additional commercial, or R4, but the R4 limited to apartments or condo building only. So if you read through the PUD, we've kind of struck out townhomes and those types of things that would normally be allowed in an R4 district, really to try to focus on higher density residential projects that we think would work well with the Norwalk Central area and the higher intensity of commercial that might be on the property. Previously, this was zoned a variety of C2, C0, R4, and R160. If you were to look at our zoning map now, it's kind of a hodgepodge because it's kind of. Yep.
Could you change the screen to what you're looking at on the screen? I think we're just looking at the podium still.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, there you go.
You're sharing this.
I'm seeing a parcel.
Oh,
Thanks, Baker.
maybe I've got something screwed up.
You see it now?
Got it. Yes.
Okay, so
Sorry.
Just to back up quick then for Councilman Baker's knowledge. So parcel A, again, the commercial parcel in red, it's kind of the front quarter of the property, and the back 3/4, 2/3-ish is the parcel B, which would be the mix of commercial and residential. Back to current zoning, again, it was kind of a hodgepodge, kind of remnant zoning from the kind of larger zoning of the Hughes Century Crossing area. When that went into a PUD, it kind of left some remnant pieces that really didn't make a whole lot of sense, being what they were on the HH property. So this cleans that up and puts things in a little bit more context sensitive nature. We did also look at doing some reductions in setbacks. Really the thing that drove the need to do this PUD from the get-go was the Fairway property that was purchased at the corner of Chatham and Highway 28. And they purchased that with the understanding they were building a private road. The city has worked with them and talked with you all in some past meetings about that road being public. And that would be represented by the north-south green dashed line. And so this PUD lets us set some setbacks that let the Fairway site continue forward without a lot of significant modification. Lets us get a road put in there and have it be public. So that was kind of the main driver. And then the rest of the land uses and requirements, just from talking with the property owner about projects and things that they had been exploring, though we don't have any real firm projects identified to the city yet. So that is the gist of what the PUD attempts to do. I guess one other thing I want to call out in the PUD document itself, because there's a residential component, we do have parkland dedication requirements. I worked with Robin, our parks director, to kind of review what that would look like at a max density if it all became residential. It was a little over 2 acres of ground. And as we've had discussion in previous meetings, we're trying to get away from smaller parks. So we didn't do a whole lot of change to the PUD here other than talking about how the city may consider a fee in lieu or an improvement elsewhere in the community in lieu of getting 2 acres of ground there. So I believe Robin took that to the Parks Commission and they were okay with that idea. Some ideas they kind of threw out there was maybe a trail that would help connect Norwalk Central up to our regional detention basin area, and then that could potentially go on into the Howland Point area. So just some different ideas. Again, it's not saying that that's going to happen. It's just more calling out that that's an option, that, you know, we would prefer not to have a small park in that area. But we'll review that in more detail should a project come forward. Let's see here. So we took this to the planning commission. They held a public meeting on Monday, the 27th, earlier this week. I updated our staff report with some of their recommendations. So I want to run through those and some of the things they talked about. The first thing being that, and I guess I should have mentioned this with the R4, we currently have the PUD written at 24 units per acre. That is more density than the city code would typically allow for R4, which caps it at 18 units per acre. We did that because there was some discussion with the property owner that they had been exploring a project from a high density developer that would have that level of density. They showed me some projects around the metro, and I talked with those other communities about how they handle the densities. And they do come out to about 24 units per acre, and those communities had put those projects into a PUD similar to this. So stepping outside of their normal zoning to increase some density. So we talked about that at the planning commission. They ultimately recommended that we proceed with a zoning of 18 units per acre right now, understanding that if there's a project that may be interested in the property, that we would entertain a change to that. So I know at times we have zoning amendments come back and things change, and we just want to, if we decide to go that route with 18 units per acre, let folks know that there's a chance that that may come back before you yet this year, I would imagine, for an increase if you want to go to 18 units per acre. We also talked about if they did 24 units per acre, what are some things they could do to add some additional requirements to maybe make sure we had a better product out of the property if we allowed that higher density. So we talked about a increase to architectural requirements. One idea would be that if you wanted to do 24 units per acre, you could say, we'll do that, but the building has to be 100% class 1 and 2 materials. Currently, we allow a R4 building to be 40% class 1 and 2 and 60% class 3 and 4 with no more than 10% class 4. So we talked about that at the planning commission.
Luke, what are a couple of examples of, so brick instead of?
Brick, so class 1 and 2 would be brick and stone and glass and that type of things. Class 3 would be fiber cement. Class 4 would be vinyl siding. So the apartment buildings we have in town, we wrote that code to match the apartment buildings we have in town. So Legacy Landing, if you want to look at what that would be, Legacy Landing, was built before the code, but we wrote the code to that, what that building was. Same thing with High Point. So that's the type of building we would normally get under R4. So if you're saying, hey, we're okay with higher density, but we're a little bit worried about what product that might be, you could say it's 100% brick building. From looking at the projects that they've kind of let me in on, I believe that that would not be a problem for those projects. Ultimately, the P&Z, as it relates to that, again, decided they would rather stick with 18 units per acre now and consider a change in the future. But they did like the idea of a higher architectural requirement. So without giving additional density, they recommended that the architectural requirement, due to its proximity to Norwalk Central and just being a highly visible area, they wanted to change that to 60% class 1 and 2 and 40% class 3 with no class 4 materials. So you'd be a primarily brick, stone, glass building with 40% fiber cement would be your typical materials you'd see out of that. They also discussed and recommended limiting height to 4 stories, which I don't believe to be an issue with most projects we would see. So those were the 3 main planning commission recommendations. We did also receive some comments from an adjacent property owner, the folks that own Hughes Century Crossing to the south, with some questions about what the intent of development along Chatham would be. The Hughes Century Crossing Norwalk Central area is zoned TC, and the TC district has a requirement that no parking or loading zones are between the front of the building and the street. because we wrote the HH Norwalk PUD as C3 with 0 setbacks, it doesn't have that requirement. So the question was, is the intent of the city to promote Main Street style development on the north side of Chatham, similar to what is on the south side? Or are we okay with there being, large parking lots between Chatham and a building frontage to the north? From staff perspective, I don't think it was our intent to not have a kind of town center on the north side. I think the intent had always been that Chatham was going to try to be promoted as a main street. So I think it's just a function of us identifying C3 and not adding in that requirement that no parking would be between a building and the street. So I don't necessarily disagree with the statement from the property owner. But our planning commission did not consider that. That comment came in after the planning commission public hearing. So I just think that would probably be something to discuss as the council, and if you would want to add in that requirement. Again, right now, we would allow a building to come up to the street, but there's nothing that would prevent them from putting a parking lot in front. So.
Okay, any questions for Lou at all? Okay, thank you. Lindsay, have you received any oral or written communications on this item?
I have not.
Negative, okay. Dude, I'm sorry.
Real quick, so the 18 units per acre density, that is written in what was sent out to council in that packet, or has it been amended since then?
So when we do PUD amendment, when we have a PUD or any zoning amendment from P and Z and they make a recommendation, we always inform you of the recommendation, but the zoning request comes to you in its original form. So to answer Luke's question, the PUD as it is right now says 24 units an acre. The recommendation from planning commission is to reduce that to 18. So if the desire was to do that, then we would follow up at the second reading with the amended ordinance.
So there's that, there's the materials.
Mhm.
That's the second recommendation.
Yes. And then building height.
And the building height.
Yes.
That's what came from P and Z. So if council is going to make a motion on that, I think what P and Z would be recommending is approval with this plus those modifications to the PUD.
Correct.
And then
And
sorry, go ahead, Stephanie.
well, I think you're going to say, and then what about the parking? Because the whole idea was to not have the parking in front of the building. Is that separate? Because it did not go to planning and zoning. Is that what you said, Luke Harris?
Yes, that was correct. That was not a discussion topic at planning commission. That comment came through after the fact. So that would be something to consider and would need to be added to the PUD.
So we got about 4 different items that we could consider to be part of it. We get to consider building materials, what we want to do on that. And then we can consider the parking arrangement and what we may or may not want to do on that, right? And then the other questions would be
Density.
density, the number of units that we might allow there per acre, right?
And height.
Yep, then how tall the building is to be. So those are kind of 4 main things. So Lindsay, have you received any communications at all then?
No, I have not.
Okay, very good. So we'll open the public hearing. Does the public have any comments that they want to share on this topic? Already. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know at the time, did it?
Yes,
Okay, all right.
6:30.
A long time ago.
All right. Plenty of time. All right. Hearing no comments, then we will close the public hearing for this item. And note the time on this one, and that's going to be 6:45. So now, does the council have any questions, comments, or discussion?
I just real
Yes, I
quick,
do. Go on,
go
Brian.
ahead, Stephanie.
Brian, you're up.
I was confused on regarding the parking. What has planning and zoning done And what did the developers request? I think I followed everything but that.
It sounds like the request from the developer was to maintain the north side of the area the same as we would the south side of the area as for the parking.
No,
No,
So
the developer from the south side is requesting that the developer on the north
North
side
side
has
has the
to
same
follow the
limitation.
same limitation.
yeah, that's right. And that came through after P and Z had met, right?
correct,
So P and Z never had the benefit of considering that.
correct.
Did you get anything from the applicants on their opinion on that item?
I have not.
Any other comments or questions?
Okay, I'll go. So the parking area, I just kind of said this a couple minutes ago. I would like to maintain the concept that we've been working on since this started, where the buildings, you know, zero setback at the street, and then all the parking is behind, except for, you know, maybe we'll have street spaces like parallel parking, I don't know. But I don't want this big parking lot in front of the building. That's specifically what we were trying to get away from. So I would like to see that. I guess what the adjacent property owner is asking, I would like to see that. Did that make sense?
I think so.
Okay.
My question would be, is Fairways quite a ways down the road with their current site plan and what they're working on? I'm looking at YouTube because I'm assuming YouTube helped know what's going on there. And does it show that it would comply with this
So
requirement? This is that I'm asking because
Right.
this was not a developer, this was not the developer request or the landowners requesting this PUD. It was the city saying the
Yep.
PUD makes the most sense.
What we would-
I'm asking a little bit of that.
so if we were to match on the south side, the highway fronted lots, so the first lot on the south side between Hughes and Highway 28 does not have the TC requirement of no parking between the building. So if we took the philosophy of what's on the south happens on the north, if you went back to the parcel A and parcel B, we would say, I think that the parking requirement was only on frontage on parcel B on Chatham, right? So parcel A, where Fairway is, would not be subject to that.
So we would implement that by parcel.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
And my next question would be for parcel B, because I know Holly knows a little more on parcel B.
It would affect,
It would affect that one, correct?
right?
And
And that's a little harder because, you know, when we're talking about hotels and projects like that, they also have to, they're held to requirements by the franchise and their prototypes and fire lanes and all sorts of things that we have to kind of mix within that as well. So that's maybe a little bit more of a consideration for those further in pieces into Chatham.
So at a minimum, we know that there's likely somebody on this corner right here that would be concerned about that parking requirement. The further east, I don't know that there's been any other interest in that location. Not that I'm aware of. I just know that there's interest in that corner.
Multifamily.
Yeah, as far as I know, multifamily was the further east components, but again, I've not seen any draft layouts of anything other than Fairway. So other than knowing of interest on certain things, so I can't.
So Fairways, I'm sorry, Fairways parking is where, I mean, just looking at a square of A and B is not helping me very much here. Can you like pencil in where Fairway is and where its parking is, and then so parcel B, that circle that just went away, that was potential hotel.
Correct.
And then Chatham is coming up, is that street from at the bottom coming up?
It's Chatham. The Fairway store. I believe we probably have a site plan buried somewhere, but a crude drawing. I believe that store is going to be somewhere here close, quite close to this frontage road.
Yes, it would be close to the frontage Green Road It would be set back from Chatham, and then they do have like a one aisle of parking with parking on either side south of their building between Chatham and their building. Which from the concepts I've seen for the potential development south of Chatham, that would be a similar layout where there would be a building setback and then parking and other things.
And from
North
the
of it.
drawing, in fact, I think you showed it earlier. Would it be possible for us to show a drawing of this location right here?
Marriott.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll just forward that over to you really quick.
because I think part of what you're gonna see there is, there's that corner is, there's not going to be a building, but there's not parking up to that corner.
Correct.
Because you specifically brought up there may be an opportunity for a small plaza or signage, something to brand
Mhm.
Norwalk Central.
I just sent it.
Okay, I'll see if I can bring that up. Stephanie, this might help.
Nelson,
Yes,
one that the spot that you circled, you said it could be a concern of developers and I think it would be helpful if we understood if they want it or don't want it. I'm trying to figure out how the developers can all get along. And I'm trying to figure out how to make it work for the developers. And it's not clear to me how to do that. I do like Stephanie's idea and what we originally thought of, that we have the buildings going around close to the street. And I remember that.
Yeah. So two things. One is Tim Portson has a comment in the chat box that you might want to read, Lindsay. And then I guess, I mean, I don't mind if there's a hotel with like a front entryway and there's maybe 6 spaces in front where people can park and check in. What I don't want to see is the big sea of parking facing the main entry into Norwalk Central. That's exactly what we were trying not to have. So, I mean, a little parking is okay. I just don't want to see the 100 spaces or whatever out there.
You want to read that? Do you want me to read that?
yeah,
I don't
go
care.
ahead.
Okay, so a comment from Tim Portson, who's with Diligent Development. He said there is no request from the developer. Just pointing out that there may be some inconsistency in our PUD and flow. May not be and could be done really well without forcing town center. Diligent is fine with it if the city is wanting to support growth of the whole area by both developers the way they see appropriate. It was just something noticed. They're willing, or I'm sorry, he is willing to jump on and speak if allowable and adds value, but understands public hearing is closed. My silence as to not open, I don't know, just point out some differences on either side of chat. Might be better if he's allowed.
I would say we make sure that meeting chat is off, so we're not having dual meetings, and invite him to speak. Be my opinion.
I would say the public hearing is closed at this point.
Yeah.
Well, unless we're asking for input.
He's not the developer or owner of the land.
Oh, okay. I thought he was. I'm sorry. Thank you for clarifying that.
So the gist is on this map that you're seeing, and I hope everybody can see that. I labeled B to correspond with the PUD. So A is where the Fairway store is planning to locate. And then parcel B is east of that frontage road and north of Chatham. What I was, the comment that I was making in that southwest corner, so in this general area here is also a proposed, just planned hopefully for a hotel to locate there. And I was just pointing out that immediately across the road is this open space without a building up front. Granted, it's not parking. I just thought that might be a point to bring up.
David, do you have any comments or thoughts as far as the idea of having no parking along there?
I think that before we could make a decision as a council, I think we've got to talk to the landowners and deals they've got going, because if they're gonna put a hotel there and this screws up that deal, I guess I would tell you that I think we as a city would be doing a disservice, because we're the ones that we requested the PUD to begin with, and I guess I'm just looking at it from a standpoint of it doesn't make sense to, it's not, I don't know, I guess I'm struggling with trying to how to say this. It's not our land. We can kind of give some guidance, I think, and we can say this is what we have done with it, but as a city, if we're really pushing to get a second hotel there, I don't know how putting a 0 lot line up there and saying that it needs to have no parking on that side and making it a TC lot makes any sense on any of that. I don't know.
How would that work, Luke, if, let's say the council decided that we wanted to put that lot line up there and make it the same on the north side of Chatham as is required on the south? Is that something that leaves any leeway for like a developer, like a prospective hotel?
It would depend on how it was written. If we just copy and pasted what's in the standard zoning, it would not provide much flexibility. I mean, it's pretty cut and dry. It says no parking, loading, anything between the front of the street and between the front of the building and the street. We could, knowing that there's someone in, I mean, I feel confident we could probably craft something that works. I've not seen the specific layout of what that site might look like.
Right.
So, maybe a thing to do would be if we can work with those folks and take a closer look at that and potentially craft something that works and see if it, again, I'm not sure what that looks like, so I can't comment on it's 90% of the way there now or it's 0% of the way there now, right? So
I guess if I could, I'd be kind of hesitant on having a vote on this, because that is a pretty major change. And, this is a city initiated PUD. For the purpose of make sure that's a public road, and the representations, I think, that I've seen from the city side, to the property owners were that, okay, we're just gonna take this PUD and you're gonna have flexibility of being able to put commercial in there or residential, but we really need this for the public road and be able to accommodate the city's request. And I think, each additional restriction we put on is a restriction that wasn't consented to or probably even discussed with the property owner. Property owner did this as a cooperative response to a request by the city.
So
And I think
you would
it's-
suggest we take the time to get some input from the property?
I-
owner?
What if,
Okay.
Jim, so this is the first reading of an ordinance. We can make changes in between those readings of the ordinance. It's the third and final reading where what is presented to council becomes effective. Is it possible that they could just approve this reading of the ordinance and advise staff to work with the property owner and come up with that revised language?
I don't know if there's consensus to approve.
What if we,
Contrary to what P and Z present, I mean, because at this point, it would take all 4 of us to vote yes. If we're gonna go
What
against what P and Z said.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily going against P and Z, because they've approved the PUD with some recommended amendments. But
And if we don't follow those, then it would require 4 yes votes to approve it, correct?
not on the smaller amendments.
what if we only voted on the amendments that were voted on by P and Z? And we didn't do anything with the parking yet?
That's kind of what Luke suggested, that we move the thing along and then let them, get the input, I think, and bring it back to us. And then we could refine the ordinance, Is this pretty time sensitive, I imagine, because of the store going in, right?
we do want to, again, with the impetus being to get the fairway lot, which for Stephanie's benefit, if just to go back to that, I did forward Luke the fairway site plan, if you want to take a look at what that looks like. But But to keep that moving along, we need to get the PUD approved. It's kind of in a holding pattern until that zoning is wrapped up so that we can say it meets zoning and we can actually approve something. So I shared it through Google Docs, so it's gonna,
Yeah,
okay.
there it is.
Probably as far as you know, I mean, is this, do you have any comments about what we're discussing? right now?
I think that the flexibility on that north side is very key. It's a different type of stretch of road than the south side because we only have a couple of commercial parcels, once you're off of Highway 28, and then it goes really into kind of that high density or that multifamily interest. And so I think, Fairway, and if it's a hotel, an outlot that goes in there and there's, maybe one more commercial user, I think that we need to do what we can to get those good users done and underway because the rest from there, it's just not the same as the south side of all that other land that we have in there and how that's worked out. So I think it's good that we have the flexibility of the 0 lot line, that if it works for the development and the developer, they'll do that. They want that look as well, as long as it works for them. But we'd really be tying their hands on a couple of these developments if we have these extra stringent requirements with the parking and the extra facade and things like that. I think that's really bad. It's already really, really, really expensive to develop right now, and just adding those things in, or a project may just not be able to go in there if that's the case. Because again, with hotels, they have to abide by their franchise, their prototype layouts, things like that, safety that is required around their building. So yeah, I would not personally having those in.
Okay. I'll make my comments. I guess I agree with Reva's thoughts, right? That in my mind, I think is in their mind. The concept of this when we began was going to be that someday it would have that same appearance going down through this, okay? But I also agree with David. It might be kind of not in our best interest to lay that on it right now, okay? And I guess I would hope that we could get to the developer on that north side agreeing to that concept or finding a way to agree to that concept, right? So we could make that real and still move those projects forward. Because I'm really glad to have that property in play, right? I mean, that increases the amount of the development that we were trying to stimulate. Good for the city, right? But we also know, and I think the rest of the council believes this, that, we're trying very, very hard to make that a very nice asset for the community, to make that the best we can make it, in appearance as well as accessibility. So what goes in there is a concern to us. Why don't we tick down each of those 4 things and just see if we can get some discussion from the council, their thoughts on the other topic, before we move forward here. So one of the other ones was on the building material idea. Do any of the council members have a comment or thought on the building material limitations that was recommended by P&Z?
I would
We
take
could
the
go on.
planning and zoning's recommendations. I mean, we've come up with, other people have asked to do a lesser standard and it's been rejected. And I don't know why we should change what we're asking for this.
You're okay.
Yes, it's expensive to build, but
P&Z increased the requirement though. That's maybe what Ed's asking.
Right.
Related to the density.
Well, there's 2 things.
No.
One's a
he
material.
was talking about building materials.
Yeah, building materials is what I was talking about right now. And so they wanted to raise that standard a little bit over what we currently have.
So I'll go back through exactly what that was. So normally an R4 project would be 40% class 1 and 2. So that's the brick, stone, glass, that type of thing. 60% class 3 and 4, which could be class 3 fiber cement, class 4 vinyl, but no more than 10% of the building as class 4, which would be the vinyl siding. P&Z's recommendation was to change to 60% class 1 and 2. So an increase by 20% for those materials, and 40% class 3 and no class 4. So they are recommending an increase in architectural material requirements
For the entire parcel B.
for all of parcel B that would be R4.
Okay.
Yep.
So again, it's related to the housing component, the
Yes.
residential component.
Correct.
Okay, so I misunderstood. I'm sorry. I actually agree with planning and zoning. I would like to see a little bit higher standard for our multifamily, but on the other hand, that's not what our code says, and I don't know why we should impose something stricter. I'm sorry that I misunderstood what you said earlier, Luke Harris.
That's okay.
And I sat through planning and zoning and the original concept was that if they wanted to go from 18 to 24, that they would have this extra requirement because they would have the extra density. That was the original discussion, and then P and Z took it the next step and said, we're gonna make it 60-40 and leave the density alone.
That doesn't seem very fair to me.
Did you get the impression that P and Z would understood that there, if a project came back forward and requested a change in that density, did they express being open to that?
They were open to the 24, but they wanted the project to come back if it was gonna be higher than 18.
So it wasn't that they didn't want that density.
They just wanted it to come back if it was gonna be more than 18, and they wanted to then be able to put more restrictions on it if they wanted to at that point, so. But I felt like that, based on their discussion, I felt like they were. The discussion originally was that if they wanted to go from 18 to 24, then putting this 60-40 requirement on there made sense. But they went ahead and stuck the 60-40 requirement on there because they felt like in that area, with it being Norwalk Central, they felt like it should look a little nicer to begin with, so. That was their rationale. And if any of them are on, I would love for them to speak because they. But I don't think any of them are here, so that was my take of what they said.
So it sounds like the
Accurate.
thing to consider then would be the number and the density, right? And then, perhaps leaving the rest of it alone unless the density request change.
I think, and I think was it Luke, you were somebody, you or Elliot suggested, I don't remember which one, that it was that that you could write it so that the PUD was 18 with the current regular standards, and then if they wanted to go up to 24, then they could have you could put the 24 on there with the higher restrictions, so the 60-40 on the 24. With the, and then, but they were insistent on staying at 18, and then if they wanted to go higher than that, they come back to them and ask. But they stuck the 60-40 restriction on there, even without giving anything else.
So is there, I'm just looking for staff direction to make sure we're going down the right path for what that next reading looks like, and we've got things worded correctly.
Right.
Does council want to link those two together? The material and the density?
To me, that would make sense. How about the rest of the council? Would you like to see it handled that way?
I'm fine with that. Brian,
Okay.
Stephanie looks like she's thinking hard.
Hey, you there, Steph?
Sorry, I had you on mute. I said I was good with that.
I'm okay with the 18 with whatever our standards are, and then the 24 with the higher 60-40.
Okay.
I'm okay with that, because that to me it's a reasonable ask if you're gonna get more out of it,
Yeah.
put a little better product in.
Okay, makes sense to me. Does that give you enough information?
That- I understand that.
So that knocks out two of the P and Z recommendations.
We got height.
So the third one was height limited to 4 stories. And then again, that would be for R4
For the R4 only, and
product.
I got a sense from them that they weren't gonna. They were pretty insistent on 4 stories being the cap, and I think it was just more of a visual thing you look through.
Yeah.
I don't even know what's the hotel looking at there,
4.
3, 4, so it'd be in line with I mean, that was kind of the consensus was 4.
From a staff perspective, I'd be surprised if we saw anything over 4 stories, just as the higher you go, there's more construction requirements. You have to start using steel instead of wood and all this stuff. So
I have a question for the fire chief. Do you have any thoughts or comments while we're talking building height?
No, we've been addressed with the hotel specifically. We've worked with the developers to ensure that we have fire access for the height of the building. So I think we have that handled.
Thank you.
Mm.
Well, I guess it's to the council to debate here.
I'm
Yep.
okay with it.
I'm okay with that.
Stephanie, what do you think?
On mute, Stephanie.
That's why she's so quiet.
Sorry, sorry. I'm okay with that, again.
All right, so you got that too.
So the last one would be the parking as a restriction on the front. And now it's my understanding on that one, from what I'm hearing, you say we're not at a point where council's really ready to act on that one until you get some feedback from.
Right, we'd like the input
owners.
from the property.
Okay.
The developer.
Yes, correct.
Both sides.
So Jim, what I would suggest, and Luke, you guys, please tell me if I'm off, is if you act on this first reading, it would be to approve with those 3 changes we just talked about. And for the second reading, we would come back with information and a revision in the ordinance that would reflect what the property owner is requesting.
correct.
Or we could offer those as individual amendments too, couldn't we?
Well,
Vote them up or down depending on what we want to do.
well, we could, but it seems like everyone's in consensus.
We've
With regards to everything. other
we've
than-
done that.
So
Yeah.
so I would say that you would, just do as Luke suggested, that if we decide to have a parking amendment on the second reading, you could get more input from the property owner and have a little bit more complete analysis of it, because like we said, this wasn't brought up really in the public hearing portion of anything, and no one's really considered it, so. And that's a pretty major change. I think.
So what, from a staff perspective, I think what we would do would be bring back all the changes that you vote yes on, and then talk with property owner, developer, hotel folks, get a sense of what that language might need to be. Maybe it's no language added, maybe it's they're okay with it and we just add it full bore, whatever their thing is, and then we'll report that back to you. This is what they are suggesting, and then we can have that discussion and see how it works.
Okay, sounds good.
And then we can vote on that amendment separately to have it included with the second reading.
Yes,
Correct.
Correct.
yes.
Good. I would make a motion to accept the P and Z's amendments and their on this.
I don't think that's what we talked about.
Actually, what we need is a motion to accept the ordinance as it's written in the packet, I believe. And then we'll adjust
Oh.
that.
I guess if I were to suggest a motion, based on what I have written down, would be, you would be approving the first reading of the ordinance with the following changes. 1, limiting to 4 stories. Number 2, linking together density and material.
Mhm.
And number 3, to return back with a proposed change regarding the parking matching town center.
But that wouldn't be in the ordinance. That would just be direction at the next one. We would be discussing the parking issue, and then the council could take a separate vote at the next meeting, whether they want to include some other restriction on that.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, would any council member care to make such a motion?
So moved.
Yeah, I have a
Second.
motion. And I have a second.
You wanna ask them issues? So your motion written down.
I am 98% sure that I do, but I will double check before I post it.
Good, good. All right. So having a motion in a second. Lizzie, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Cool,
Yes.
Lester,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Reba.
Yes,
Very good. That motion has passed. And now we're looking at the first reading of an ordinance amending the official zoning map of the city of Norwalk, Iowa. By rezoning DH Nation, Norwalk and Fairway properties east of Iowa 28.
That's exactly what we just did, yeah.
Thanks. We're moving right along. Resolution approving the site plan of Norwalk's ready mix concrete. Here we got the new one. Yeah. Okay, this request is for a substantial modification to the site plan of Norwalk ready mix concrete. The site plan includes the demolition of the old mixing plant, construction of a new one, and expansion of the dispatch office. Luke Paris, you have some information to add.
Yeah, I mean, that hits it pretty well. Luke Nelson has the site plan pulled up there. You can see on the current screen, which is labeled demolition plan, the current mixing area is kind of that central building labeled existing building. So if you go to the next page, you can see the additions. So there on the south, you got the new building addition to the dispatch office on that building to the south. And then the new proposed mixing plant is kind of there off to the, I guess, northeast-ish of the dispatch offices. So from that regard, the site meets our standards and code requirements. It's really pretty basic from that standpoint. There's lots of good buffering already there. So it's an interesting site with a concrete plant with a bunch of residential around it. And in all my years here, I've never had one call about that place. So we knock on wood. We hope it stays that way, but
They were certainly there first. They've
Yep.
been there for a long
and they and again, there's lots of good screening around it. I think it's a great situation with how the whole thing's set up. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's certainly nice to have a business putting down new roots in the community, you know, investing in the future of it, but. Let's see. Are there any comments from the council?
we do also have the applicants here if you have any questions of them.
I'm gonna make a motion to approve it.
Okay, I have a motion to approve. Can I find a second?
Second,
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Lindsay, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Lester,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Reba,
yes,
Cool.
Yes, that passed. The next resolution is approving an agreement accepting a surety for public infrastructure at the Dunn property, Lot 1 area. This item is a preparation for the next item on the agenda, item I. And the developer is requesting that the city approve the final plot to allow the plot to be recorded. Abstracts updated and lots sold prior to the completion of the construction of the public improvements. Before the city can proceed with that action, we need to accept the surety that the public infrastructure will be installed. Luke Paris. You have any
Yeah,
comments?
again, great summary of it. That's it. We have the Dunn property that we looked at a preliminary plat a while ago, essentially a road down the middle and creating 3 lots. Future items on this agenda are for a site plan and the final plat of that area for us to release and record that so that we can then issue building permits and land can transfer. We either need to have all the infrastructure built or accept a surety for it. So this is an item to approve an agreement that would accept that surety. Total amount $688,000.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any comments from the council or questions? This topic?
Motion.
Yeah, I have a
Second.
motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Baker seconded. It's been moved and seconded. Lindsay, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Baker,
Yes.
Reba,
yes,
Cool,
Yes.
Lester.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. The next resolution is approving the final plot of Dunn Property 1. The request is for approval of the final plot for the Dunn property across from Michael's Foods, which would create 3 lots in the industrial area south of Delaware Street. The plot would also establish a right-of-way for a road running north and south through part of the property. Luke, do you have any comments at all to make on this?
No, again, so related to the previous item, I'm sorry, I opened up the wrong item. I opened up the site plan. Yes, so 3 lots essentially, and the road right of way lot for the road extension, and then kind of 3 remnant lots that would be considered outlots. Outlot X would be the large 19-acre future development piece to the west of the new road. Outlot Y would be a development parcel to the south. And then the outlot Z is a regional detention basin for the property. So not regional as in the city would do anything with it, but regional for the properties on the site. So yeah, happy to take any questions.
Okay, does the council have any questions or comments? I know Polly worked pretty hard to bring this to fruition too, along the way. And it's no small lift to try to put together a development like this. And I think people should realize that, so I appreciate it. Hearing no questions or comments, can I get a motion from the council?
Motion.
I have a motion. Is there a second? Second. Motion and a second. Lindsay, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Reba,
Yes.
Cool,
Yes,
Lester,
Yes.
Baker.
Yes.
very good. The motion passes. We have a resolution approving the site plan of Dunn Property Plot 1, lots 1 and 2. We just took action on the final plot for 3 lots on the Dunn Property Plot 1. This request is for approval of a site plan for 2 buildings on lots 1 and 2 of that plot. Luke, do you have any comments on that?
Yep, so as Nelson pulls up the site plan here, this again is lot 1 and lot 2, so the northern 2 lots of the final plat we just approved. 2 spec buildings, 20,000 square foot, being located on there. I don't believe we have any user info yet on those. So right now, just looking at the kind of square shell building. Once those are constructed, then when there's finished space, they'll come through and do a building permit to finish out a space. 23 stalls on each one in front of the building, and then kind of warehouse loading dock on the rear via a loading area to the south. Architecturally, it's in our M1 district, so that's our kind of least intense one. If you go down to the elevations, you can take a look at what the front of the building looks like, which meets those standards, and then the sides and the rear of the building do not have architectural requirements. So metal panel building, pretty standard industrial warehouse, multi-tenant building.
Any questions for Luke or comments by the council?
Motion.
Okay, I have a motion. Did I hear a second?
Second?
Second.
Okay, I should give that one to Stephanie because she tried first. She started first, so we'll give that second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. And Lindsay, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Cool,
Yes.
Lester,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Reba.
Yes.
Okay, the next item up is a resolution approving a purchase agreement for 1.63 acres of ground to be used for a future water tower site and authorizing certain improvements thereon. Several months ago, we discussed options for land for our next water tower. The land discussed was south of Capital City Fruit on top of the hill. We negotiated with several property owners and ultimately found success with diligence. Okay, Jim or Wayne, do either of you have any comments to share on this topic?
Well, I guess the only comments I would have is, yeah, it had been previously discussed, 1.63 acres. The total cost in the purchase agreement is $268,000. And we're allocating $163,000 worth of that to purchase the real estate. And also included in this is, since it is a future water tower site, there were some upgrades in the infrastructure that was required. Mainly the water pipes and everything under the ground. Yeah, because they needed to be enlarged and have additional engineering and things like that. So with us requesting that, those upgrades will be done prior to purchase. I'm expecting prior to closing. So then the dollar amount that we pay at time of closing will include the cost of that additional infrastructure, which is just under $88,000, and then also a proportionate share of engineering and everything. So that's how we get it to the $268,000 with the actual purchase price of the real estate at 163.
And we would normally do that, we're requiring the overside of the upside.
Yes, that's been a practice that we've had for a long time. If we're requiring somebody to increase the size of the infrastructure to accommodate our request, we usually do pay for that difference.
Okay. I don't think Wayne cared to share any comments on this one from.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, any comments or questions from the council?
I've just got one question. Why are we paying 20% on engineering on this project? Just seemed really high. I mean, is our engineer, are we paying the engineer to do this, or are they paying an engineer to do this and we're paying that bill, or?
I don't know that I
It's just a portion of their engineering. I'm just curious, because that was the only number that stuck out with that one.
this, when the developers upsize, and Wayne, Luke, if you know something different, please jump in. My understanding is when the developers come to us with offsetting expenses like this, they usually turn in those costs. That's something goes to our engineer to either say, yes, that makes sense, or no, it doesn't. Wayne, I recall that both you and Tony Belizzi agreed that those were fair costs.
Right, it's a change order, so they got a price from the contractor, they redesigned it, they got a price from the contractor, they're always allowed like a 10 or 15% markup from the contractor's price. And then this ups their bonding, the maintenance bond amount goes up by the equivalent amount, so they have a higher bonding cost. I'm not saying it's. I understand what David's saying, I'm not trying to convince you otherwise, I'm just saying.
Paying their bonding cost.
What's that?
So we're paying their bonding cost.
The proportionate share of the increase. I mean, like Wayne said, I don't know if it's right or wrong,
If it
but
was a
it's
city project, would we be paying a bonding premium on this?
It'd be built in all
Yeah.
the prices, yeah. Sometimes it's a line item, but usually, I mean, they build those into your bid prices.
20% is a typical number we use on engineering when we plan for budget. I think Wayne makes a good point. I'm not arguing for or against it. Just saying that's a typical number we use for planning for engineering. And I didn't hear any negative feedback from staff or our city engineer.
It's exciting because we're gonna accept 20%, so we could start doing 20%. Because he's typically told us 16 or 15 or 17. I mean, it's been right around that 15, 16, 17% of a project before, yeah, and I've always thought that was ridiculously high. So. The only part I have a problem with, and it's not very much, is that's the thing, is it's just more aggressive.
Does the fact that it changed to some of the piping and stuff, does that affect that amount?
Well, I think why that's there, my understanding is that, let's just use an example of if their original cost of the project was $100,000, they'd pay a certain percentage of that for engineering, right? Since we are asking for upgrades in that, so it's going to cost more to put the project in the ground, there will be a proportionate share of increase in engineering costs also, because that same percentage would be there. So there is an increase in engineering costs and design costs with the cost of the project going up. And they're same thing with the bonding, like when you bond a project, it's based upon the value of the project. So when that goes up, the cost of their bonding is gonna go up. Same with their construction supervision, things like that. Now, that doesn't address whether the 20% is the correct amount, like David says, but that's why there is an incremental amount that's more, is because, yeah, our request for upsizing the utilities in it is costing extra.
But I take it our engineer reviewed this and he didn't think it was out of line. Wayne, is that right?
It was not expressed to me if he was. He reviewed the numbers and was okay with it.
And I'll just tell you, I bring it up purely, I'm okay with this whole thing. I just don't like that percentage piece of it, that struck me as really off.
I don't blame you. You know, the cost of construction is going up astronomically anyway.
Yeah.
And, you know, so you look at that, and I would imagine there's an opportunity there for the architects to.
The engineers and architects if they tell us they're always gonna pull a percentage of their product, of what they're doing. Even if the cost of materials, everything goes up, they're doing the same amount of work and they're getting more fee because of the cost of materials in the background. I mean, that's where I'm.
That was my point, yeah. That was my point.
But I don't want to slow this. I'm for it. I just don't, that was my question, was that piece of it.
All right. Any other questions or comments by the council? Okay, hearing none, can I get a motion and a second?
Motion.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Lindsay, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Lester,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Riva,
Yes,
Cool.
Yes. Okay, now we have the final reading of an ordinance amending the Hughes Century Crossing Planned Unit Development. This is a final reading of the Hughes Century Crossing PUD. Luke, do you have anything else to add to this?
No, just looking forward to getting this wrapped up and approved so we can work on a project I think everybody will like.
All right, any discussion or comments from the council?
Motion.
Very good. Motion to second. Lindsay, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Baker,
Yes.
Riva,
yes,
Cool,
Yes,
Lester.
Yes.
very good. That motion carried. Okay, now we have a topic called future agenda items. And Counselor, did you want to comment on this just a little bit?
Yeah, I would. It's, and I wouldn't mind input on it. It's to address the situation with how do we decide what goes on an agenda, what doesn't. I mean, we've seen a little bit with recent plat of survey, and we were gonna have, there's times that citizens might come in during open comment time and say, boy, I'd really like you to discuss this. And really the way things can get on the agenda, or the mayor can put it on, or the council can put it on. Well, the question is, how do we get the council to put it on? We've had a couple instances recently where maybe one council member wants it on and other council members don't want it on, and suddenly we kind of get that little bit of a dispute on whether it should go on or not, and staff really doesn't know how to proceed. So what we're talking about here is providing this part of an agenda where if the council wants to put something on the agenda, we can actually have the council member propose being on the agenda, and the council can either vote for having it or not. And I guess what I would see is that would be a way for the council to have something on the agenda regardless of what the mayor thinks. But also, if a majority of the council doesn't want to put it on, the mayor still thinks it's a good idea, you can still put it on the agenda also. So I guess it's just been as a result of some brainstorming and talking the last couple of weeks, trying to figure out a clear path to getting something on the agenda, especially when maybe we have a couple council members that want it on, a couple council members that don't want it on, and kind of puts the staff individual would be in charge of that. It kind of in an awkward position trying to figure out whether we put it on or not. So that's kind of what this was put on there for at this point in time. It's not to discuss the merits of the issue. It would be simply, boy, I'd like to talk about, whatever it is, golf carts. That maybe a subject comes up soon, we want to talk about golf carts and have it on the agenda. Well, some might say, well, we already discussed that 3 or 4 times. We don't want to talk about that again.
Maybe a new sidewalk in front of Baker's house.
That's right. Something like that. So it's just a mechanism that we're kind of putting up here is what we wanted to have this discussion right now, when we didn't have any hot topic going on regarding the subject. To kind of, I don't know, propose it, throw it out in front of the council and kind of give you guys an opportunity to give your reactions to it.
Well, I like it. I think it's a good idea. For one thing, it's, this is about the only time as a council we can get together and talk, And then the other piece of it is that the staff, it's got to make life easier for the staff. Because they wouldn't necessarily waste a lot of time trying to chase down a rat hole that, what I mean, that isn't going to have the support to move forward. What do you guys think?
Jim, are there any guidelines? I know that there's different councils as far as if they're mayor centric or non-mayor centric and all of that. I thought there were guidelines.
No, there aren't. No, we are mayor council form of government where the council votes on the issues. Mayor has veto power over resolutions and ordinances. That veto can be overridden by a supermajority of the council. But as far as rules regarding conduct of meeting and stuff like that, that's kind of each city kind of can form their own rules, and the council can change those rules at any given time. If you really wanted to get into it, there are some, you can find some histories where mayors and council have fought tooth and nail, and there's a battle on power over who controls the agenda back and forth. But
and that's what we're trying to avoid.
Yeah, that's what we're trying. That's right. That's right. And it's not really an issue at this point in time, which is maybe a good reason that you discuss it now. But really, it's more of a situation where we've had some instances where, and I'm not going to say it's heated or argumentative or anything like that, but, city manager might have one council member saying, put this on the agenda, we need to discuss it. And then, it gets on the agenda, the next council member says, why in the world is that on the agenda? I don't want to discuss that. So it's just kind of a tool. Does that answer your question, Brian?
Yeah. I was just curious if there are any other rules that we didn't know about.
No.
Well, the only other guideline on this would be that we can't necessarily make a decision in this discussion, right? But we can express an opinion whether or not we want to see it.
Well, I don't know what's on the agenda. It's an agenda item as far as this is, but
how this would be conducted.
yeah, well, I mean, if practically how this would be put into position, it wouldn't be where we could dive into the real merits of the issue because it's not on the agenda. So you can't debate the merits of an issue without it being on the agenda. So it's really just more, I'd like to have this on the agenda, and it could be a situation where we have citizens come and present during an open,
right,
during the presentation time and say, boy, I'd really like to have this on the agenda later. Well, the council can't discuss it, they can't debate or deliberate, during the open comment time, 3-minute time limit at the start of the meeting. But with having this, then at the end, if a council member is inclined, they can say, you know what, I really liked how Mr. Smith presented that, and I think we should discuss that. And I'd like to.
I think we've done that
I'd
in
like
the
to have
past.
No, we've never really taken a formal vote on it. I think we were just hoping to formalize it so that everyone understands how it gets done.
I like it. I think it ought to stay on the agenda. What do you guys think?
Well, I like it because I've asked for something to be on a future agenda and I have no assurances that it will be on there. And I think it's an important topic to discuss. So, I would like to have the ability in a council meeting to make that request and give more direction to the mayor.
And it's important to note, to get something put on the agenda is a motion, somebody to second, and a vote of agreement. That's when it ends up on the agenda.
Yes.
Right.
So in other words,
For
Stephanie,
a later date agenda.
yes,
Yeah.
David, you got any thoughts here? I don't hear anything out.
No, I'm good with it.
Okay, David likes it.
The city attorney and I spoke last week about it, so.
All right, you got an opinion, Baker?
What?
Do you have an opinion?
I always have an opinion.
Well, I know that, but
I think what the problem is I was looking for more guidance on when, like at the time we've been talking about, when it's a repeat item. I want to bring up every single week, I'd like an agenda on X. Well, I think that's ridiculous, and there should be some guidance. And I don't honestly know what they are to like a repeat item. If you're Prairie Meadows, do you bring it back up every 6 months or every year? How does it work?
I think I think it's appropriate, as you say, to not bring up repeat items, but the event with the plat survey that you recently talked about. I also think that reasonable minds could differ, not taking one position or the other on this, that, some people pictured it as a repeat item. Others said, well, no, that's a different issue. And I think that's a good thing for this thing would be for, is it gives the council, when there is some sort of subjective or maybe finding a fact, to make that decision.
Well, since this is and before us, would anybody like to test it with a new topic for the next meeting?
I think it's as good of guess as any to have it a suggestion for it and then voted on. I think that's as good of answer as any.
Okay.
And I guess the way I picture it too is, like I said, it also, the mayor can put things on the agenda too. So if it's something where the council says, no, we don't want it, I still picture the mayor being able to put that on there anyway.
No, we always approve the agenda before we get started. Right?
That's right. Yeah,
So if the council doesn't want something, no matter who puts it on there, we could pull it and vote it down.
yeah, that's right.
Right, that's why we vote.
That's right.
So, okay. All right.
Okay.
Well, not hearing anything else, and we will move along. And with the expectation that that'll stay on the agenda for us. Okay, council inquiries and staff updates, and I gotta begin with Jim. Sit right here on the top of the list. This is a good list, Jim, so you okay? Okay. Yeah, I'm surprised. Anyway, do you have any comments? He was at a cyclone game last week.
No, I don't have any comments.
You're not gonna mention losing one trophy and the other one being in danger. Let's see,
I'm not.
Stephanie, do you have any comments or things?
No, I don't.
David?
Well, we had a WRA meeting last week. They presented on their year plan. Is that basically what it was?
Yeah.
We're looking at Luke and Jean a little bit. So this, they sat through it, and they were gonna invite them to come and speak on that at some point in the meeting, to talk to the council about their plans to take care of our wastewater and improvements that need to happen, and improvements to the plant to make it flow better. And
It's always good to know how the sewer flows.
no, we're not filled, right?
Okay, Luke, do you have any comments? Luke?
Yeah, just a few things. February, our permit numbers were 8. So might not seem like a lot, but it's pretty well on track with what our 5-year average was for permits in February. And then looking back, we had 15 in January and 7 in December. So that puts us at 30 in the last 3 months, which our 5-year average over December, January, and February is 30. So maybe signs of things getting better. Usually there's a pretty big jump in March when construction season really starts going. So we'll probably know if that's true in a month. So we'll keep an eye on it. Scooters passed their final inspection today. I don't know if they have plans for their openings or anything, but they are good from the city perspective. So that's good. They really got that up quick. On Monday, I attended the kickoff meeting for the Warren County Comprehensive Plan. So that was interesting to be part of that process as a participant rather than the person doing it. And some interesting comments from some of the rural folks that were there that I think if we can get a dialogue going, I think having growth in cities probably benefits them, because lots of frustrations from some of those folks about people living out in the county and driving on county roads, and they're trying to get their farm equipment around. And so hopefully we can get all that to meld together through this plan process. And then lastly, last year we did a presentation at the AP Geography class at the high school, and they invited us to come make that presentation again over new urbanism and just general city development. So that was a fun thing, and some things Elliot and I were talking about that maybe we'll try and come talk to you all about at some point. So
Sounds good.
that's all I got.
All right, very good. Sherry, do you have any?
I do not tonight. Thank you.
All right. Wait,
WHKS was the engineering firm we hired to do Blue Stem and Prairie Sage up in the ridge. We delayed construction until 2025. They submitted a new schedule. We talked about continuing with engineering on that. Their new schedule does show a pause in engineering until this fall. They don't want to get too far ahead of schedule on it, but it's not a full delay of engineering. We're just going to delay it a few months. So just want to give you an update on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
thank you. Chief,
Just want to remind everybody on Saturday, April 8th, is a pancake breakfast. So it's a big day in the community. So come out and have some pancakes and see the fire trucks. They start at 7 o'clock and go until 11.
very good. Those are good pancakes.
They are good pancakes, secret recipe.
And you got coffee?
And we got coffee, yeah.
All right. Other chiefs?
The Antonio Lewis murder trial got moved at his request until the end of May. We were all set to go. All the depositions have happened and just got delayed due to a family issue of his defense attorney. Today, I submitted a Warren County Philanthropic grant for a mobile radio for a new police car, whenever a new police car happens to show up. It's time to upgrade, as you know, our portables, but also our mobiles, and we want to do the mobiles one at a time as the new cars come online. And then tomorrow morning at 8:45, we'll be displaying how loud our police car sirens and fire truck sirens are as we escort the Robo Warriors team out of town to the state finals competition.
All right.
So hope nobody's sleeping. Okay. Because the citizens pay a lot of money for the lights and sirens and they need to hear them.
In a pleasant way, right?
That's all I want.
Thanks, Chief. Let's see. Oh, I skipped over Tony. Tony, are you on? No? Okay. Let's see. Jean.
Not much more than what I've discussed tonight. Just working on water and sewer rate reviews. I'll be coming forward with that in a couple months. Other than that, I think I'm good.
All right. Well, thanks for the briefing tonight. Thanks for the work you did putting the budget together. And, really appreciate that. Really do. I know. Holly.
It just made me laugh because we went from like pancakes to murder.
Yeah, well, you know, it's a little variety in the operations in the government.
No segue. Okay. Just a couple of updates. So update on the Marriott. Just talked to the developer a little bit ago. So that's the site plan that you saw earlier, and they officially submitted their application for their franchise on Friday. They're working on their final site plan submission. Here in the next couple of weeks, they'll have that turned in. And then they're hoping to also have their building plans turned in at the same time. So things are moving along pretty well there. And I know that Chief Porter and Luke's group and everybody worked really hard on getting that site plan figured out where it'll work, because it's all the sites inside Norwalk Central are very interesting and are a little bit more difficult to work with. So everybody's working hard to come together on that. Like Luke mentioned, Scooters is pretty much done, and they do have their grand opening scheduled for March 17th at 8:30 in the morning. So any council members that could go there, we will have some photographers there and some people supporting them. So if we can get some statements, maybe the mayor will be back by then, that'd be great. Starbucks did close on their land, but they haven't put out any official announcements yet that we're aware of, but we'll sure get that out as soon as they do. And then the certified site process is moving along really well. Chris has been working on that. We have most of our the estimates back from the engineering firms, because there's several studies that we'll have to do as part of this process, geotech and environmentals and things like that. So we're starting to get those back, and they're looking about what we expected, what we have budgeted. So that should turn out just fine here in the next few months. And other than that, tomorrow we have some Coast of our investors coming into town specifically to look at our sites for an international restaurant that we're,
All right, there you go.
and then also working with one of the local developers on a really kind of cool housing project that we might be able to put together near Norwalk Central. So be courting them tomorrow. If anybody's free and want to come by, we'll be at City Hall at 2 and probably the Merc right after that.
Video too. All right, well, I'll see if I get a break from my boss that's been driving me like a rented. Delivering flowers. Anyway, okay, thank you for those comments. So they're looking at the possibility of an international investment in a restaurant.
Mhm.
Big league stuff.
You know, we've been working rapidly to have the first foreign investment from Kosovo in Norwalk because the state of Iowa, we're all competing against each other. Who's going to get the first one?
Yeah, that'd be cool.
We're really close. Yeah.
All right. How about the library? Do we have any updates from the library?
Oh, we're always up to something, but I just wanted to point out that I did distribute the March, April calendar, lots of good things in there, and I'm proud of my staff for coming up with such a variety of activities. So check it out and come in and visit.
Good. I took mine home. My wife tore through that baby. She was looking at it. So
Good, good,
we
good.
have some interest in our house.
Excellent. Thank you.
Park and Recreation.
So updates on the field house, as far as sponsorships go, Diligent Development has the naming rights to the lounge. City State Bank, naming rights to the field house. Sportsman has applied for a couple grants with Wellmark Foundation for 100,000 and Prairie Meadows, for 450,000, and they are hoping to hear back in May whether we have secured those or not.
All right.
And they're also working on naming rights for the basketball courts currently. De Novo's update. They've received shop drawings for the building and are currently being reviewed by the architect and the engineer, and everything is as planned moving forward. So as of now, everything's on time.
Good. Those are good updates to watch that moving forward and see it kind of coming to fruition. Be awesome if those transfers out. Okay, Lindsay, do you have any comments, thoughts?
Nothing from me. Thank you.
Ready? Okay, and then we'll move on to Brian. I guess you're the next one up. Yeah, there he is.
What do you think, Ray?
Okay, thank you. And then see, Jackie's not here. Let's see. I think Stephanie, I don't have Stephanie on the list, but Stephanie, do you have something to report or comment?
You already asked me, I think, nothing.
I did ask you.
Still nothing. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Okay.
It's all out of order.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, Luke.
I don't have anything.
Wow.
You're gonna hear me talk plenty during the closed session, so I'm just giving everybody a reprieve right now.
Well, I don't have anything in particular to report. Other than it was interesting driving by the central project up there. And I noticed them doing ground tests. You know, for some of the new construction that's coming. I thought, all right, that's a sure sign of spring, you know? Here we are, winter's probably over. All right, with that. Whoop. Oh, yeah, that's right. We gotta do the closed section.
I know you were trying to
Yeah,
get us out of here.
I was getting ready to wrap that baby up.
Nice
Here we
try.
go. Okay. Thanks, Luke, for holding me to the fire. Closed session pursuant to Iowa Code Section 21.51J to discuss a purchase or sale of particular real estate, only where premature disclosure could be reasonably expected to increase the price of the governmental body would have to pay for that property or reduce the price the governmental body would receive for that property. And Jim, is this a valid reason to go into closed session?
Yes, it is.
Ah, very good. All right. Can I get a motion to move into closed session and a second?
Motion.
Motion,
I have a motion
Second.
and a second. Very good. Lindsay, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Reba,
yes.
Poole,
Yes,
Lester,
Yes.
Baker.
Yes.
very good. The motion passed. And we'll note the time on that to be 7:55.
He's having.
Okay, we'll take a brief recess to allow people to exit the council chambers, and then we will go into our closed session.